known for taking a little bit of license.
I do. I mean, in the case of Victoria's costumes, I mean, I start by doing the research and looking at how things should be made. Obviously, we have real items of clothing to look at, which is always brilliant. You can see how it's really constructed. You start with the real thing, and then you can digress. You have to know the rules first before you break them. And I think, in a way, you can't help breaking the rules with making clothes like this because you can't get the same fabrics as you could then. So, you know, already you're using modern fabrics or modern versions of fabrics. So, in a way, already you're doing the contemporary version of. But I think in terms of the cut, on the whole, this is probably one of the most accurate things I've done. I didn't digress too much because it's about a real person in a real time, and I couldn't start sort of going off on a tangent really.
Where would you have taken something like Shakespeare in Love? Did you go a little off
even with that, no. I mean, even with that, really, the shape and the silhouette is as accurate as we could make it. Obviously, that's a bit more difficult when you're going back to Elizabethan period. You don't have original garments to look at. You can only go by paintings and portraiture to how you think something was cut and to achieve a silhouette. I think probably what I tend to do is get a bit more adventurous with the colour.
Okay, is
possibly.
there an example of that?
And I think all the way through Victoria, I mean, I think I do use quite a lot of strong colours. That's not to say that strong colours weren't used in that period, but quite often when people depict old periods, they kind of don't use so much colour, and people did have colour. And I love colour. I just like using colour. And in a way, if somebody's got 26 outfits, you've got to tell them apart, haven't you? So there's got to be the sort of the red one, the yellow one, the blue one,
Now, when you went back, are you a student of old Hollywood period? I mean, were there ever any like Betty Davis and Errol Flynn?
Oh, yes.
You know,
Betty Davis is Queen Elizabeth.
Exactly.
I love. Yes.
That's my favorite
yes,
too.
But
would you look, or the Great Robin Hood, for example? I mean, are there some of those great Technicolor movies? I mean, would you be an admirer of what the old Hollywood costume designers
sort of like
did?
30s, 40s does, the Elizabethan. Yes, I do. I absolutely love all of that, and the way that they pushed it and stylized it in their way. And in the same way, yes, I do. I'm a big fan of that. And I think it'd be too boring if we were actually trying to make a film with complete historical accuracy. It's too boring. It's not. You're not making museum pieces. It's not a documentary. It's a film. It's entertaining.
And how do you make the clothes look like they're not costumes?
Like their clothes?
Exactly.
Like their clothes are not costumes? I don't know. I mean, that's, well, there is one thing that we always do. Again, it's the same person who is the clever textile painter actually works on every costume once it's been completed. Even a dress that's sort of a day dress. Once it's finished, it never goes straight from the sewing machine onto the body. It always has a little bit of work done to it. And a lot of these are painted into and sprayed into just with shading and subtleties, just to make it look like they've been around a bit. I mean, like the hems, for instance, would be a little slightly darker than the top part.
Right, because they've been
But
soiled.
having said that, I mean,
they didn't have dry cleaners back then.
They didn't have dry cleaners, but then again, she wouldn't have been rolling around on the floor in this.
No.
I mean, if you do a contemporary film, obviously there's a lot more work you have to do on clothes to make them look worn in. You know, a pair of jeans having been worn for a month look much better than a pair of jeans that have just come straight out of the store.
Now, you've been very much identified with this kind of extraordinary period work, but you probably enjoy doing other things like Velvet Goldmine.
Well, Velvet Goldmine is period, but I love Velvet Goldmine. Yes, of course, but that is period too. But it's 20th century. I guess I think a lot of people don't even consider the 20th century to be a period, but it is obviously.
Of course, if you do 70s or 80s, you have to be right.
Yeah.
But there was that was a case where you could have some real creative license.
Really had fun with that. Yes, really did. With
Ewan McGregor.
Well, the period was about dressing up anyway, and the period was about sort of reinventing yourself and dressing up. So it was great. It was a gift, designer's gift, and also it was very meaningful to me because I grew up then. That was my I was 13, 14 at the time that this film was
Stardust
set.
Or whatever.
Absolutely, and I was making my own clothes and dressing up, and I wanted to be older, and I wanted to be going to all the concerts, and so it was great that I actually had the opportunity to make all the things I couldn't do then, and to
So what would you, working with someone like Martin Scorsese, which you've done for quite a few films now, including Shutter Island, the most recent one, which was very period too. Yes, it opened very well. And very 50s, but movie 50s, right?
It was, yes. It's real noir looking, isn't it? Yeah.
That was, fun to see Leo in the fedora and the big
It really
big
suits
coats.
him, that look.
Yeah, I think it does. And also, you would have been dressing all the inmates and all the sort of crazy people.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that's tough.
It's different, yeah. I mean, that's a good example of clothes being made to look like they've been worn. I mean, things like all the prisoners. For sure, they're wearing a uniform, but they all have to look different and individual. So that was quite a challenge to actually make people who are prisoners and crazy people.
Yeah, with someone like Scorsese, or if you were to compare him to someone like Neil Jordan, who you worked with in quite a few films, what would be their different approaches to what you do?
Neil and, well, you've picked two that are fairly similar. I mean, I would say Neil Jordan, Martin Scorsese, Todd Haynes, all very similar directors.
How so?
They're visual. Not all directors are, surprisingly. No, they're not all. I mean, they are in what they do, but they're not necessarily. They don't necessarily notice everything, or they can't necessarily communicate with you a vision. Do you know what I mean? And all of those three really do appreciate clothing and costume and understand it. I don't know, it's difficult to pinpoint, but I find they're very similar.
For example, would he be giving you references from old movies?
Oh God, yes. I mean, everything. I mean, his entire conversation is littered with references from old movies. I mean, you can't talk about a collar or a buttonhole without some reference to a collar or a buttonhole in some film that you've never heard of. And then when you say you've never heard of it,
he screens it for you.
He either screens it or you get sent a DVD, comes through the post, and there it is. You have to.
So how do you communicate with him? I mean, long distance before you get on set?
What he does, he has somebody employed full-time who does all his research, and so at the very beginning of a project, as soon as you've got the script and read the script, even before meeting him quite often, you're sent a little package, which is fantastic.